Go to the next slide. So I'll be your host for the evening, the MC, if you will. And yeah, just before we start, I want to give you a little introduction into what's going to be happening, the agenda, and then also some, what do you call them? Just some, the way we run this thing.
It's sharing the slides.
You're sharing it?
Because I'm not. Okay.
No, I can't see my own slides.
Yeah.
Okay, let me stand here.
Yes.
Can you guys still hear me? We're very much figuring this out.
We can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, great stuff. Cool. Yeah. So just quickly, introduction, Zoom etiquette. I guess I've done the welcome. For the guys who are remote, please keep your videos on. We would like to see your lovely faces. But do keep the audio muted. We just don't want to interrupt the speakers when they are talking. When you have a question, please raise your hand or keep it till the end of the session. I'm sure the speaker will let you know when there are available for questions. And then finally, please be sure to change your Zoom name for the prize. And we also want to see what your name is, if you're okay with that. No pressure. And then finally, if you're here in person, you do still need to raise your hand. However, you will need to do that physically. And I think everyone knows where the bottom is. If you do not, it's just out here to the door, and then left, and then the first right. When you can. There's a little hallway, and you can't miss it. Next slide, please.
All right. Slide behind it.
No worries.
Right.
Oh, that's too far.
Great job.
Can you go back?
Great job.
Okay. Today's agenda, this evening's agenda. So firstly, yes, introduction and welcome. That's my job. Next up, we're going to have Sia do the news. Is Sia on the call? Are we ready for him? I don't see him on the big screen up there.
Yeah, I actually don't see him on the participant list either.
Okay.
In which case, do you mind if I phone him? And
no, you're not.
Then we might have to move to the next slide.
Okay, great stuff. And then once Sia has finished with the news, or maybe the other way around, we'll see what happens. We're going to get over to the BI flashes, and that's going to be from Keamo.
The traffic.
It could very well be the traffic, yes. Next up, we will have Keamo doing a BI flash on the pros, cons, and how-tos of implementing report page tooltips, or report tooltip pages, actually. And then finally, the main session for tonight is the final piece of our brick by brick series, something we like to call the final destination, and that will be presented by James, who was actually part of the user group last time, and we kindly pressured him into doing this presentation for us. Right. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Keamo. Are you ready with the flash?
Yeah, I can start with the flash. So Sia's going to be after me, right?
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me first of all?
We can hear you in the meeting room. I'm not sure if the guys online can hear you. I imagine they can.
Yeah, we can.
We got some thumbs up. Brilliant. Okay, take it away, Keamo. All yours.
The user group event. Are you around?
Okay, well, can I kick someone out of the sharing because I can't share?
You can just stop sharing it. I've made you a host. Yeah.
Okay, stop sharing.
Let me share my screen. Damn, that is not PowerPoint. There we go. Can you guys see my screen?
Not yet. Well, not on the big screen.
I am sharing. Am I sharing?
I can see a screen.
Yeah.
We're seeing a Zoom login window.
Oh, that's my one.
Yeah.
So stop sharing. No, it is. Yeah, we can see your presentation now. We
Okay.
just need to make it plan here in the meeting room.
How is the?
I don't know why it's not showing up.
Maybe we can just plug in the HMI cable.
Okay. Oh, sorry, but are you sharing from your machine?
No, we're
Yeah,
trying to see Keamo's
Okay.
HMI signal.
We're still in the presentation mode, though. That's what you were
Can you send me
expecting.
this
So,
Samsung for the Hisense remote? I don't know which one it is.
okay, so now I'm saying.
Yeah, this is the one. Input. I'm figuring this thing out as I'm going along. Hey. Sorry.
Wrong one. I think I'm just gonna maybe switch back and then.
There we go. Okay, so it's currently showing my screen. Just show the the Zoom meeting. There we go. The second thing.
Okay.
Okay. Yes. Okay, Keamo, we can see
Perfect.
your screen in the meeting room.
Okay, cool, perfect. So I can start then. So, if it wasn't said already, Keamo Matlala, and I'm going to take you guys through everything Power BI tooltips. Let's move on to the next. So the agenda for today is what is a tooltip? We're going to go through what is a tooltip, different types of tooltips, advantages of having a tooltip, considerations and limitations, and then I will take you through a demo for the how-tos. What is a tooltip? A tooltip is a brief informative message that pops up when you hover over an element in a graphical user interface. So in our case, a dashboard. Tooltips are usually initiated in one of two ways, either through a mouse hover or a keyboard hover gesture, such as your arrows that you click, arrow buttons that you click. Different types of tooltips. So we have the standard tooltip. So that's the basic tooltip, as you can see on the image there. This is the out-of-the-box solution from Power BI itself. This is still customizable. You can change the theme and include extra fields to this tooltip, but I'll take you through that on the demo. The report tooltip. So this is, as you can see there, it's the report tooltip is the one that you add as a report page, but you convert to a tooltip. So that's just to give you a better, a more sleek way of visualizing a tooltip. And if you have multiple fields that you want to visualize, this is generally the better way of displaying it. Then you have your visual header tooltip. So that's that question mark icon. And then you'll see that on visuals once this setting is on. Visual header tooltip, I think it's been renamed now to help tooltip. Is your help tooltip, as the word says. You just display almost like a context on what the visual's about, or where it will navigate you to, if it's an element or button. Then we're looking at the advantages of tooltip. You can use the tooltip to provide extra context for elements on a visual on a dashboard. So for your report page, you can have you can use it, add it to provide more context. Users usually who don't know how to use a system would go refer to the tooltip to understand it. So tooltips can be used to help the user understand complex features of the system. You can add more detail to a visual by providing related information when making use of a tooltip. So that's that report tooltip that I mentioned. Just to add more detail to a dashboard, to a dashboard visual. Considerations and limitations. Custom tooltips, or otherwise known as report tooltips, are not supported for Power BI custom visuals. So if you adding a visual, installing a custom visual, you have to consider that you won't be able to use that report tooltip. Standard tooltips can affect the performance of initial load time of a report page. So if you add in custom fields to your standard or basic tooltip, it is added to the DAX query and it does affect performance. So just take note of that. You can turn tooltips off completely for visualization in Power BI. Reports, however, when you pin the visual to dashboard on the Power BI service, the basic tooltip will always display. So there's no way of like removing tooltips completely on the Power BI service interface. So now to the demo. Okay, let me just quickly get that dashboard out. Cool. I'm gonna start off with the standard tooltip. The standard tooltip, I'm gonna hover over this visual here with the maps and no context. So as you can see, the standard tooltip. Yes.
We
can't see the dashboard.
Yeah, we can only see the presentation.
Cool. Let me reshare then. Okay, cool. Can you see this dashboard? Cool. Thanks for that. So I'm gonna start with I'm gonna start with the standard tooltip, as mentioned. So as you can see, there's a bunch of countries, no context. It's just a map, and if you hover over it, there's the standard tooltip, the basic tooltip. This is the out-of-the-box solution. So once you drag and drop fields, they will provide, this tooltip will be provided for the fields that you do drop. So if I double click here, you'll see that country code and life expectancy is a part of the fields for this visual. And if you do want to add more visuals or more fields to add more context to the tooltip, you can just drag and drop them by the tooltip on the visualization pane. And I'm just going to rename this from first country to, this is yeah, it's going to bother me. Yeah, so and it'll be added to the basic visual. Another cool thing you can do is you can change the theme. If you hover over into let me just go back and do it step by step. So you go into the view tab, drop down by the themes, customize the current theme, visualize, and you make your way to the tooltip. You can change the color depending on what the theme is for the dashboard. This is for the basic tooltip. And once you hit apply, you will see that it will change from that out-of-the-box grayish somber look to whatever look you would like it to look. I think that's all on the basic tooltip. If we move over to the report tooltip, so this is the more sleek tooltip. I just have to remove this. This doesn't look cute at all, but it was for demonstration purposes. So with the report tooltip, you'll see the way we create it is through a normal report page, and on that report page, you just tick the option of that allows you to use the report page as a tooltip, and you'll be able to have this more sleek look on in terms of tooltips. This is my go-to in terms of if I were to when I was implementing dashboard tooltips, and I'm gonna go through some how-tos. How-tos. I'm not gonna create a whole new tooltip, but I'm just gonna take you through the steps that was taken to create this one. So with this tooltip, what we had to do was we had to create a new page, rename it to tooltip, and then make your way over on the visualization pane to page information. That's where we allow use as a tooltip. So we just indicating that this can be used as a tooltip, this report page. And for the canvas settings, we want to structure the tooltip to be the size, a specific size. So we don't want the tooltip to cover the whole dashboard, because that would be terrible. So there's a bunch of options here, but so there's a tooltip option that Power BI gives you themselves, but you can customize and create and choose your specific canvas size for your needs. So I've chosen height of 350 pixels, width of 400, and and then what we do is we drag, we can add visuals to this. Obviously, you just want to do this for demonstratory purposes. So this is a card visual. I'm gonna add it here, and if you want to add your population, you add your population. There's no context on this, and this is a very terrible design, so please don't judge me on it. But that's why it was there. And once you go onto the report page, you'll see that this visual is added and is dynamic. Another just tip, because I've seen this happened to me a couple of times, when you switch off keep all filters, or if it's off by standard, then make sure to switch it on, because if it is off, then you'll see that your tooltip won't work as expected. So just take note of that if there's no sync between report pages. I think that's everything report tooltips. So last but not least, the visual header tooltip. So that one is just that icon that I mentioned. I'll show you this one. This is a button. Under format, you can find under format pane general, under general header icon. You go to your icons and this will be off by default, so you're gonna have to switch that on. You can use text or you can use a report page. I only have one tooltip, but just for example, like if you did require a report page for the help icon, that is possible. And you add your text, and this is basically just to help give context on what the element is used for. I think that is everything. I wanted to show a quote, but now it's going to be a lot of work to do that. If there are any questions, let me actually show you this quote. This is a very terrible quote, and I'm going to regret this. But let's do it. Where is the? I can't hover over my Zoom. I can't. So I can't show you the quote. The quote was only tools forget about their tooltips. And that was said by no one ever. So don't quote me on that one. Yeah, and that is all I have on tooltips.
So I guess the moral of the story is don't be a tool, use tooltips.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I remember seeing a while back, there was a guy in a Cube video that was talking about the performance impact of using the default tooltips versus the page table tooltips. And I think it had to do with the delaying of when the user actually wants to see that data. So a standard tooltip would kind of delay, and you mentioned it would delay the load time of the whole page. But if you use a report page tooltip, it only delays the load when the user interacts with it.
100%, yeah. So the alternative to using basic would be that that report tooltip, and that report tooltip will be loaded as you hover over the visual and not on the report page load time. That is correct.
Okay, cool. No, yeah, thanks, Keamo. That was really insightful. Thank you for taking the time to prepare.
No problem.
Using the option configuration, you can also configure the tooltip, the new tooltip, the feature, new feature.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, if you go to the option side of it, I don't
There's-
remember.
I can give a bit on that. It's currently in preview, but that option you was talking about was the drill through. So you'd have to select the preview. It's under Power BI options, and you'd get an option for the modern tooltip. And then once you've selected the modern tooltip, because it's in preview, I don't want to go too much into it because it's still in preview, but you can select that modern tooltip, and then when you hover over the tooltip itself, you'll be able to drill through. You'll be able to hover over it and click a drill through button. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, that is correct.
That's good to know. Are there any other questions for Keamo, either here in the room or online on the session? Otherwise, we can carry on to you. Sia, have you joined the call yet? I think we saw your name in the participant list.
Yes, I am on the call. Thank you.
Hello. Yes. Are you ready to tell us about BI News?
Yes, I am.
Awesome. Okay.
All right, so I'm just going to, thank you. I'm going to just share my screen. That one over there. So just let me know when you can see it.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Cool. So thank you and hello to everyone joining us today on the last user group for the year. So yeah, it's nice to be here with you guys. So just to share with you what I've got today for the news and Power BI updates. So for today, in terms of the agenda, I've got the introduction, and then under the news section, I've got the Power BI ideas site updates. I've got announcing sub-metrics roll-ups in Power BI Matrix, And I've also got some topics that I thought were interesting that came out of the Microsoft Ignite event that took place in October. And then under the update section, we currently have the Power BI October updates, which I'll be covering one key feature there that I thought was cool in terms of some of the changes that they've rolled out. And then lastly, we've just got some useful links, which basically give you the sources of where I found today's news and updates. So just getting started in terms of introductions, my name is Zungu, and these are my details if you are interested. And today I'll be covering your news and BI updates. So in terms of the news, for the first topic with the Power BI Ideas sites updates, just to let you know on some of the changes that have been made on the Ideas sites is that the improved search experience to help users find relevant content has been rolled out in the 22nd of September. And that's basically trying to utilize certain search keywords to find ideas that have been logged on the site so that you could either piggyback off of someone's idea or upvote it on the site. And then also the enabling of personal Microsoft accounts in the addition to work or school accounts has been enabled. That rolled out in the 22nd of October. So now if you have a personal Microsoft account as opposed to school or work, you can now also get into the Microsoft Ideas site. The third update there is that the duplicate ideas which are merged into one has now also been rolled out on October, which basically allows people to merge ideas as opposed to logging the same ideas under the Microsoft Ideas site, and then you end up getting different votes for the different ideas. So once it's merged, it's now all going to be basically falling under one. Oh, sorry, there's a bit of thunder on my side. So that's going to basically roll up into one idea that will then accumulate the vote so that it can get much more attention. And then the search for related ideas during new idea creation, that will be rolled out in November. So this month, that feature should be rolled out, which allows you to search for ideas during your own idea creation, so that you can see if someone else has logged a similar idea and you can might as well piggyback off that, idea. All right, and then the next topic in the news updates is the announcement of submetrics rollups and Power BIs. So with the metrics function that had been rolled out for quite some time now, you could create individual matrix under the goal function in the Power BI service. But now they've improved that by allowing sub-matrix to be created out of parent matrix so that they can roll up into a call it group level matrix that you want to report on. So that's something that was rolled out in October, which I think is quite cool. And then they're just making some also key consideration in terms of things to just be aware of with the new functionalities that historic matrix that have been created, the roll-ups will take place from the day, call it when the new feature is implemented going forward. So it won't be retrofitted to matrices that you've already created. So those would have to be then updated in order for them to benefit from the roll-up function. And also that if you've got viewers who are part of some of the subdivisions within your roll-up, so say someone is supposed to see 3 out of the 5 matrix that roll up, they will still see the 3 of the matrix that they are assigned to, but they will also see the parent matrix that rolls up the other 2. So that's also something to be aware of with the roll-up feature. And then the last item in the news section is just basically coming from the Microsoft Ignite event. There were some key topics there that I thought were interesting in what they were discussing and some of the things that Microsoft was showcasing with what they're doing. One of which is explore and interact with Power BI reports directly from OneDrive or SharePoint. So think about when you opening, for instance, like an Excel document, when you're on SharePoint, you have the option to either open on app or open online. A similar feature is going to be rolled out for Power BI, which will allow you to see Power BI reports on the SharePoint or OneDrive platform, similar to when you're seeing other Microsoft documents on the online version. And then the second topic was about deploy faster with Power BI in Microsoft Office 365 installer. The updated Microsoft 365 installer will now include Power BI as one of the applications that come with the Microsoft suite. So as you get your Excel, Word, and all the other applications, Power BI will also be one of the applications that you can get with the new Office 365 installer. And then there was a topic about simplify, extend, collaborate with cross-tenant sharing and B2B discoverability. So Microsoft is improving in terms of the B2B sharing, especially when you have like reports that are published and you would like to have certain B2B partners have access to those reports and view those reports and download and work with those reports. They've made that a lot more easier now in terms of how to set it up and actually take benefit of the functionality. And then the last topic that was covered that I found interesting was accelerate your migration experience from Azure analysis services to Power BI Premium. So this is now some functionality that would allow you to migrate certain reports that you might have created, or not reports, but models that you might have created on the Azure analysis service that you'd like to import into a Power BI report that you might be building, and you want to take advantage of the model that's connected. We do know currently that you do have a way to just connect with the analysis service connector, but now you can import the model entirely into Power BI if you want to work with it offline. All right. And then just skipping to the update section of our news and updates. So the one feature that came out of the October update was the quick measures suggestions. I like how they've actually improved this feature. So previously, if you remember, with how you would create, what is it? Not custom, is it custom measures? Quick measures. You would actually just get like a panel that takes you to a window, which you would then select the type of measure that you'd like to write, whether it's a time intelligence measure, an aggregate measure. Then you'd plug in some parameters, and it would give you some sugar syntax type of measure that basically does the calculation for you without you knowing how to write the DAX. They've now improved that by actually enabling the quick measure setup to allow users to type in natural language what it is that they want to do. And the quick measures function will then scan the model, similar to when you have the Q&A function to try and ask questions in natural language, and Power BI would return an answer. They've put that functionality now under the quick measures, which allows you to put the measure in natural language as how you want it. So like you have aggregate measures, you've got mathematical operations, if conditions. The list is available on the Power BI blog site as well in terms of what they've allowed it to do. But I feel that now it is much more powerful in that you can ask it anything and it can read through your model and write the entire measure for you. And in some cases, in one of the videos that I was watching, they actually managed to write quite a very complex measure out of just asking a bunch of questions and if conditions, and the measure wrote it, or the quick measures function wrote it all out for them in DAX and produced the measure that created the results. So I think that was also something that's awesome in terms of the October updates that came out of that. And then, yeah, after that, like I said, it's basically quick links in terms of my sources and where the news and updates come from. So yeah, you can just go through those as well if you want to just get more information about today's news and updates. And that is my section. Thank you.
If I can maybe add to the Ignite announcements, they also spoke about Power BI files being included in Power App solutions. So when you deploy a solution, you can include your reports in there.
Yeah.
Keamo, do you mind elaborating on that? You say is Power BI also moving to like Power BI solutions now, where similar to Power Apps?
Yeah, so when you have your kind of your dynamics type solutions where you can have Canvas and model-driven Power Apps and flows and whatever grouped together in a solution, one of the preview features now is to include Power BI files in there as well. So when you package a Power Platform solution, you can just include your reports that gets updated in there as well.
Okay, interesting.
Oh, thanks for asking that question, yeah. I have some questions myself, Sia. It's just on I think this was the first topic you mentioned with the roll-up sub-metrics. I just wanted to make sure I understand it correctly. So you said if someone only has access to 3 of the 5 metrics, they would still see the roll-up of all of them? So
yes.
If I understand it correctly, it's like you only have access to maybe 3 countries out of 5, and you would want to see total sales. You would still see total sales for all 5 countries, but you'll only see the sub-metrics for like the 3 countries you have access to see. Am I understanding it correctly?
Quite right. You only have access to the sub-countries that you've been assigned to, so that those you can see the details for, but you would still see the roll-up total for all sub-countries that make up the total. So that's just one of the things to be aware of, that even if you are subscribed to the, let's say, the 3 countries, you will see the 3 countries and the total for all 5 countries.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's actually something to be aware of. Maybe something that a tooltip might be worth explaining for.
I'm sure they're going to fix it in the future. That's a shortfall, and then it's one of those things. I think they just released it now as quickly as they could because it was a gap. Yeah, you need to have roll-ups, and the only way to do it is to create multiple metrics that they don't add up together. Whereas now it does roll up, but is definitely a flaw.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that does make sense. And then a final question. This might be a bit of a silly question, but I just don't know where it is, and maybe someone else in the audience doesn't know either. That's on the next slide where you mentioned B2B. What does that stand for?
That is business to business. So like, for instance, if let's say you are working at Intellect and you are sharing, let's say, reports with some of your clients that are not on your tenant, then you would create a B2B account for that client in order for them to be able to access information from your tenant.
Okay.
It's a complete game changer. I mean, literally, it is, for me, the biggest feature of the year.
Wow.
Because now, if I'm a manufacturer, I can share my Power BI reports with my suppliers, but I don't have to, I can create them as guest accounts, but I can now enable them that they can do analyze in Excel or a thin Power BI data connection, data set connection off my data model, and they can create their own and publish it to their own workspaces and so on.
Exactly. Yeah.
Literally put it up now to disseminate information throughout the entire supply chain or value chain or B2B ecosystem. It's the biggest thing by far.
Wow.
Well, I think.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. Okay. Yeah. Wow. Sounds great. Cool. Are there any other questions from the audience, either remote or in person? Rian, have we mentioned all of the comments in the chat so far?
No comments really. It was Tian already mentioned the Power Apps solution, including Power BI files, but no other comments really.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well then, in the interest of time, we can carry on to James's session. Episode 6 of Brick by Brick, the final destination. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is actually visualizing everything we've done so far.
Yeah.
Bringing it all together.
So,
James, before you do that, just in terms of the price, guys, the enterprise DNA price, same like the last 2 sessions, please pay particular attention to James's presentation. I will find something interesting to ask the audience, either the online audience and the in-person audience. So pay attention, and obviously that will be at the end of James's presentation.
Okay, that's fantastic. And then remember to stick around at the end because we will be doing a quick survey right at the end of tonight's session, just talking about next year and what you can expect to see from us in the future. Cool. Over to you, James.
yeah, I can just move.
Sia, can you just share? Then, oh no, I don't need to share mine. Oh, it's just for here. Of course. Sorry. Right.
Okay. So can
Sia, can you just stop sharing your screen?
here we go.
Aha, right, then I can share screen. Just screen.
And then can everyone online hear us? Right. There might be an echo because we're unmuted in 2 spots.
It seems to be fine for now from my side anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, you can just mute on your side.
Mute on that side.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we do that.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to stand. Sorry, when I talk, I like standing. Hello, everyone, online and here. Obviously, my name is James. I am a director at Cobalt Analytics. I believe Michael was here last month. Sven asked me to do some stuff about visualization. And, well, really, I like to think that most people in the tech space, a lot of us are aesthetically challenged. Design, art, graphics, that kind of thing is not really our strength. So I always, when people ask me about design, I always sort of talk about how I design for the aesthetically challenged. So I hope to give you a little bit of science that'll help you get the art out there. Okay, let's ignore all of that stuff, sorry. Okay, yeah, get about all that, sorry. Lots of stuff. Right.
That's very pretty.
That is gorgeous, right? And this is what, so we started, I started with this because this is basically everything you don't want to do. And we're going to work through various things that are wrong in this, but I always like this is my title slide for this talk. So let's go on. Okay, so what are we going to talk about? A couple of things. Well, the first thing we're going to start about why is design important? You know, design is all, a lot of people think your report is all about the value, not about the look. But it turns out that you actually get a lot more customer engagement with smart design, and you can actually provide a lot more customer value with a good design. So we'll look at why that happens. Then basic intro to charts and graphs. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because I know most of us are quite strong on this already, so we don't have to worry about that. A little bit about color, how to use color in design and in our what it conveys and various ways that it can be used. Then a little bit about layout. Now this for me is probably the most important thing that I've learned to make reports. It's basically like the idiot's guide to reports that people like. And so it's my way of like, okay, cool. If you follow this little pattern, you will always have report. Everyone will think your reports look good, even if you think they look ugly. So that's always nice. And then I think we will have just a little bit about space, although I'm not going to touch too much on that because a lot of this is about tooltips, and we've already done tooltips today. But if we need to touch on anything, we can, and then just some time for questions. Okay, so that's basically where we're going to go. This was at one time an hour-and-a-half talk, so I'm definitely not going to take that long today. So if I go too fast, please stop me, and I'll expand on anything that that I might be sort of hovering over. But we'll go, and if anyone wants any additional information, just let me know. So the first thing about design is that design from an art point of view is very much a theoretical concept. There's a lot of parts, and I'm not even going to talk through them, but they talk about all of these things: balance, proximity, alignment, repetition, contrast, and space. These are like the 6 core tenets of design. And we don't necessarily have to know that theory, but when we look at it, I do just like to sort of touch on them for a second. Balance is quite important in your reports. If you have all your important elements on one side on the left and then just an image on the right or something like that, you sometimes get a very disjointed or it feels wrong. So I always feel like just keeping things relatively balanced, symmetrical is a good idea. Proximity, with proximity, what they really talk about is that items that are grouped together are perceived as being connected. So if you put a border around 4 graphs or 4 cards on your chart, and you maybe put a different color, if you put a different something like that, they will say, okay, well, those 3 things belong, or 4 things belong together. So proximity is that's what they talk about. Alignment, I'm going to talk a lot about alignment when we get to layout, so I'm not going to touch on it now. Oh, sorry, go back this one. Repetition. Repetition doesn't mean putting the same thing on the graph multiple times. It means using the same font sizes, using the same font weights. Don't have some things in bold and something, or repeat. All my titles are in bold and all my numbers are in normal font. All definitions where I have text are in italic. So you have this like consistency and repetition between what we're doing. And then contrast is very important because everyone kind of knows contrast, but it's very easy to get wrong. So contrast, the big idea about contrast is if you have 1 item or 2 items that you want to stick out, you make them stick out by making them different. So we were talking just now about repetition and making things the same. If you want something to stick out, the easiest way to do that is to make it different. Give it a different color, give it a different font, put it in a different shape, whatever. If you've got 10 circles and 2 squares, people will always be drawn to the 2 squares. That's just the way the human brain works because we are drawn to outliers. So contrast is a very good way to highlight specific aspects of a report. If you have something that's very important, you'll often see on management reports that everything will be in black except a key indicator that's either green or red showing which way we're going. And that is the focus item, and that's they're using contrast in that idea to draw your eye to what's important. And then the last thing is just about space. And again, I will touch on space in the layout section, so I'm not going to talk too much about it, but I'm a firm believer in having space on reports. I'm a firm believer in not trying to cram too much, not trying to overwhelm. I find that sometimes reports actually can make you feel almost a little bit claustrophobic. There's too much going on. So I believe in bigger objects, gaps between objects, and fewer things on a report rather than trying to cram everything. Rather have 4 pages, which you can click to with each one has a very specific purpose rather than trying to put everything on one dashboard. So yeah, that's basically the simple principles of design. I'm not an artist, but I do think that these are all kind of important to us. So I do like to just touch on the theory. Okay, so let's go in and have a look at some of these things. Where are we going to start? We're going to start with visualizations. Cool. Everyone loves pie charts. No. Okay, so can't see that, unfortunately, but that's cool. So basically what this quote is by Alberto Cairo. I don't know how many people know about Alberto Cairo. He's a data visualization expert, and he works, I think, with the New York Times, or he works for he did work or consult to one of the newspapers to teach them how to do things like election coverage and use data visualization in news particularly. And he has some books that are really excellent. Let me just see if I can. Yeah. Okay, so visualizations no longer just complement a story. In our increasingly data-driven world, they're becoming a mainstream story form and an essential tool for journalists. So when he was talking about this, he's basically saying that really everyone should be comfortable with data visualization. And your data visualization should feed into that comfort level. So when people know how a bar chart works, you must not try and deceive them by making your bar chart work differently. So we'll look at a couple of those kinds of things now, but this is it's an important thing. Data visualization is an incredibly mainstream concept now. It's not just for data experts. Everyone consumes data via these kinds of charts. And actually, I think about it so much when I watch sport. And you see how many data visualizations are being produced in sport. How much stuff is, these in cricket, you've got the Manhattan graph with all the different this over and how big it was, and they show them over time, and you see little lulls and gaps and things. And it's amazing how often data visualization pops up in our day-to-day lives. Okay, so just a very high-level theoretical thing about types of charts. So we've got comparison charts where you are ranking categories against each other. We've got composition charts. Composition charts, basically the parts of a whole. How is one big total made up? We've got distribution charts, which show where various values fit on a continuous axis and how frequent different values are. And then the last one, we've got relationship charts, which show the relationship between 2 different metrics for a specific category. Okay.
Calories.
Sorry?
A lot of calories.
Yes, and a lot of calories, exactly. So I don't remember, because this thing was about pie, that's why I had all the pictures of desserts. Sorry, I couldn't remember why I'd actually done that. Okay, so what do we use comparison charts for? Well, we use them to compare categories, to compare value changes over time. And obviously the most simple one of these, or the most common, is bars and column charts. We're all very familiar with them. In many ways, this should be a staple of all your data visualization. But bar column chart should really be the basic thing that you use most often. It's the most comfortable for people to use. It's the least likely to produce confusion. And it's the least likely to falsely represent data. You don't have to, all other charts, well, most other charts have something that you have to worry about. Pie charts, you have to worry about angles. People don't perceive angles very well, so they don't realize you're not talking about area. You're not talking about, you've got a 2D visual, and it's really easy to compare them. Okay, obviously other examples here are line or area charts, but these should be the staple of a lot of our visualization. Okay, so below or sort of a subcategory of composition charts, but I mean of categorical charts, but comparative charts, but not exactly the same, are composition charts, which is how do we make up a total with what are the different parts that make up that total? So if we have the parts of a whole and we want to represent them in a chart, the most obvious ones, of course, are the pie chart, the donut chart, our stacked bar charts, where you're now doing a categorical comparison, but you're also doing a compositional comparison within the bar. So you're breaking it down, or a waterfall chart. I really like waterfall charts. If you do want to show parts of a whole, I think a waterfall chart is a good way to do it, because it's kind of like a categorical comparison chart. So it's the most intuitive. But the problem with composition charts is that they are frequently misused, and all people who've worked in data have often heard about, the problems with pie charts and why we should be trying to avoid them unless we really have a good reason to use them. So I think, we don't have a talk now. I think it comes just now about pie charts and some of those problems. Okay, our distribution charts. A distribution chart basically shows the frequency of values within a data set. So how often are we seeing this value versus how often are we seeing other values? So we are no longer so concerned with the actual categories. We want to see, where are the majority of our sales falling? Where are the majority of my, what's the majority at which I'm selling my share price? So we have all of these basic things where you're going to have a top and a bottom value, but really you're expecting to see almost everything in the middle. And this can be bell curves. It can be, I'm sure we actually talk about this, histograms. It can be box and whisker charts. And box and whisker is one of my favorite charts for doing distribution. It really shows well, because in a single graph that looks just like that, we basically have a minimum value, a maximum value, 25th percentile, a 75th percentile, a median, and a mean in one. You've got one little line chart that looks like, or one little bar that looks like that, and you get 6 different metrics in that. It's really, really useful way to distribute and to show data. So it shows us things like spread, grouping, and frequency, which are so important. Other types of distribution charts really that we talk about a lot are scatter or bubble charts, and I put them here as a talking point because they can also be relational charts. So depending on how you're using them, you can either see them as a distribution chart or a bubble or a relational chart. Is that everything? Okay. So one of the things we talk about, I don't know which chart I have in here. One of the things we talk about when you talk about distribution is to show things on a better axis. So I could easily build a bar chart that showed the populations of different states in America. Very simple bar chart, it would work. But because these things are not really, they're almost, it's like a continuous axis, these things actually have to be grouped together. I want to see, if you want to see where your big populations are, you kind of want to know, are there areas of big population next to each other, like these guys at the bottom, sorry, those ones there, or are there these tiny little areas up at the top where you've got 5 or 6 or 7 states with almost no population? So this kind of distribution chart this is a categorical chart, but because it's showing things that are on a continuous or distributed axis, we show it using, this is another example of showing distribution or representing distribution with a different type of chart. It was this one. So I actually presented this talk in Oregon. And I found this graphic from, I don't know if it was from the New York Times or from somewhere. I found this graphic online. And I was, I don't know, for those of you who may not know, Oregon is, oh, come on, man. Oregon is that state there where my mouse pointer is pointing over there. So they were really happy about the fact that I showed this chart when I was there. But then, but then 3 days later I went to Seattle and did the same presentation. And Seattle's in Washington, which is the state just above them, and they were less happy. They were not so excited. So I thought it was quite fun. But this is the kind of thing where you can use distribution to make fun. Okay. The last type of chart that we're really going to touch on, relationship chart. Basically, we're talking about 2 numeric values. You're comparing them to each other and seeing where on that axis people are falling. Again, in the sports world, they do this a lot in cricket. They compare, especially in short form cricket, they like to compare average and strike rate. So how many runs do you make and how fast do you make your runs? And you get these quadrants, like a magic quadrant. You almost get like the quadrants of people who score lots of runs very fast, people who score no runs, or few runs, but fast, people who score lots of runs, but slowly, and people who score no runs and slowly. And obviously there's a hierarchy of where you want to be. You want people who score lots of runs fast, but that's kind of like a utopia. Very few people fall into that. Most people fall into we're either more consistent, but slower, or more explosive, but more variable. So you either fewer runs, but faster, or more runs, but slower. And then when you're compiling a team, you have to kind of work out what your dynamic is. How do you get a good combination of those kinds of things? So relationships, we're looking to explore correlation. We're looking for 2 or more variables. Bubble charts have a third variable, which is the size. And then we're looking at things like a heat map. Okay. I'm going to skip through this section. Bar chart, column charts, best practices. Basically, with a little bit of thought, you can take a disgustingly ugly bar chart like that by following very simple rules. You can essentially take a chart. Oh, I thought I went back to the start. Okay, we could basically take a chart that you saw how horrible it was at the start and how much better this is at the end. And I will talk through these very quickly. 3D effects in a chart. Unless you're doing work that requires 3D, don't use it, ever. Okay, remove patterns. Patterns and fills are just what we call cognitive load. They add too much use. They make your brain think about more stuff than it actually should. So one of our main rule is to try and reduce cognitive load all the time. And that is to take out as much extraneous stuff as possible. And you'll see that some of the other things we've done here, like order categories by value for simpler comparison, makes us not have to think so hard about which is this bigger than that, or okay, if I'm looking at category 7, I know which ones it's bigger than, I know which ones it's smaller than. Start all numerical axes. Sorry, I don't know what my watch is talking about. Start all numerical axes at 0, always. Very, very important. Column charts. So if you have column charts, vertical charts, obviously, they don't really look good unless you have fewer than 5 categories in them. If you're going to go more than 5, basically, you're almost always going to turn it around and make it into a bar chart. And that's because of the space that you're working in. And remember earlier, I was talking about how I like to give my reports space. This is a very simple way to do that. Is your space is generally, if you think of a screen, it's generally wider than it is high. It's easier to do a wide chart than a high chart. So there you go there. Use color sparingly. You would have seen that when I started, I had everything in multiple colors. Those colors don't mean anything. They're just adding, again, they're adding cognitive load. They're not adding any contributing to the value at all. Rather though, I'm talking about this specific point. This is where it fits into the overall range. This is where you're not really interested in which categories it's higher than and which categories low. And you're basically going like, where does it fit? And this is how you would do that with emphasis and using color. And then from there, we basically just remove unnecessary legends, axes, borders, grid lines, all those things that you don't need. If you need them for certain reasons, cool, keep them in. But if you don't need them, if it's easier to use data labels, you've got a much cleaner chart. And you'll see that most times with data journalism, when they do these kinds of charts, most of the time they'll do it like this. They'll have a category name and a score. They won't have axes, they won't have grid lines, and it's far simpler, far less brain work to get this to work like that. And then the last time is just put in a title. Titles are very important on our charts. Okay, same thing for...
Can I just quickly ask a question around the column chart versus bar chart?
100%.
So in your example that you're showing there, you're using a column chart, even though there's quite a number of bars. I use the same if I'm using categories that has a name. So category 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like you have there, it's a long name. I struggle to somehow, if you have a lot of bars, to put that, if it's vertical, to fit the text in. So then I tend to do it like you've done it here.
Wait, I'm getting confused. This is a bar chart. This is not a column chart. Column charts go up, don't they? Columns go down and up. This is a bar chart. Column charts are the vertical ones.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Then I switched them two around. All right, cool. Then I agree with you.
I think so. I hope I'm not.
You're right.
Okay, yeah. I mean, if you think about it,
use it interchangeably.
Yes,
but actually,
that's a bar. Yeah, and that's a column. Yeah. I think so. I think right. That is. No one's ever asked me that before, so I assume it's right. But yes, that's fine. No, but yes, the more categories you want, as soon as you get more than 5, you want them to be vertical rather than horizontal. I mean, horizontal rather than vertical. So you see, now we get confused. But yes.
Yeah, except if you want to try and fit the headers in or the axis labels in, because then it gets tricky if it is an actual name or a description that you're trying to fit in.
Yeah, that's why you want it this way.
This way is better for
names. For names.
For a lot of them.
Exactly for this. Yes, it's exactly for that reason that we use bar charts rather than column charts. So yeah,
cool,
okay. So we're going to do pie charts, but really, really fast, because pie charts, we do a lot of the same steps. Get rid of 3D, get rid of blow apart, order them by value, use with only fewer than 6 categories. This is very important. Pie charts can be useful, but really they should only be used when you have fewer than, I mean, even 6 is very aggressive. I don't know why I said that's a very aggressive number. I would say generally 3, but whatever. Pie charts, because what's really important is avoiding using pie charts when you have too many similar values. You really want to be a pie chart. You want to really show a small percentage versus a big percentage, or a smaller percentage versus a bigger percentage, so that it's at least a little bit easy to tell. But actually use data labels, use a title, and then change it to a bar chart because it's better. So that's my general rule about pie charts. I only use pie charts when I'm comparing 2 things against each other and they're going to add up to 100%. That is really the only use case nowadays where I use pie charts.
I would also convert it into a donut. It's just a bit cleaner than.
So donuts are better than pies, but you've still got problems with people having to convert.
Yeah.
You're looking at arcs and trying to convert 2 arcs. I mean, compare 2 arcs against each other, and it's actually very difficult for your brain to do. And then when we were talking about cognitive load, by changing it to a bar chart, you actually reduce cognitive load. You make it easier. It's not saying that pie charts are bad, but it does make it easier to have the vertical or horizontal comparison. It's easier for the brain to process.
I see that you didn't put the labels.
Yeah.
You know, when the labels with the pie chart give you the percentage. And the
also
quantity,
very useful, yes.
That's very useful. Otherwise,
it makes a big difference if you can add data labels. You need to, and the thing is, you need to minimize cognitive load, but give enough information that people can really look at it and know exactly the story you're trying to tell. So yeah, I mean, it's just think about them. I give pie charts a hard time a lot in my talks. I have no issue with people who choose to use pie charts, as long as you think about the design and you think about what they're going to do. And pie charts on static presentations are cool. I never really too stressed about pie charts on static presentations. Pie charts on dynamic stuff like Power BI, that worries me, because now we've got, it looks so nice when you've got a 45, 25, 15, and then a bunch of little ones split. Hey, yes, I get my information. But then the next week you have 20, 20, 20, 20, 20, and you're just like, I have no idea what's actually going on here, because these things are so difficult. So yeah, it's just a case of think about your pie charts when you use them.
Would you say it's helpful for contrast if you have 5 different visuals as bars? It can become very repetitive.
Yes, so that is something that I struggle with. Even is I use bar charts almost exclusively, and it can get a bit repetitive, but or like monotonous. But if you also combine that with the idea of trying to create lots of space in your reports and not using too many visuals, it it limits that. You're no longer looking at 8 bar charts on a visual. I never have 8 visuals on a report. So that kind of, it allows you to move past it. So what I often do is I will use line charts for time. I will use a difference of a bar chart and a column chart depending on what I'm comparing. So something where I know I've only ever got 2 or 3 categories, I'll use a column chart. Otherwise, I'll use bar charts. And then you have got that contrast, but you've not got, you're not just forcing charts to different charts for the sake of it. So, but yeah, anyway, okay. A couple of little things here. I'm not going to talk too much about this, except that earlier I was saying sort your values from highest to lowest. It makes your charts easier to read. The one exception is time. We never override time. We always show time in the order that it actually happened. That's what people expect to see when they're talking about time. If they look at a graph and see that the first month is January, they will not look at what the rest of the months are. They will assume that it's January, February, March, April, May, June, July. So we always schedule time left to right in order. And we hardly ever show time in reverse. I had to show a client, it was a terrible idea to try and show time in reverse. They're like, but it's the last 12 months. I was like, no, but you still show it, the 12 months to latest month on this side, because that's how time works, it moves forward. So anyway, that's just a little bugbear. Proportions, I actually showed an example which is not wonderful about this. That map that I had, Power BI's proportional map sizes for bubbles is not perfect. So if you're showing a number that's 100 times more, your bubble won't be 100 times bigger, which is not good. We should always be showing that should be the proportion. If something is 100 times, the value is 100 times more, the size should be 100 times bigger. And that's why bar charts are so good, is because they do this very well. They really proportion, because it's a 2D visual, it's very, very good for proportion. Okay, legends, we don't need
more difficult than make.
Well, maps are extremely difficult, especially when you have something like that, because if you think of the difference between the population of California and the population of Rhode Island, or, you're talking about literally 100 to 200 times bigger. How do you do that with it?
You're going to do LA and going to cover.
Yeah, you're going to cover, exactly. So that's why it's hard. And on that visual, that's why I don't try and make it proportional. But yes, that is something we have to think about. Okay. So for legends, we don't need a legend unless you're showing multiple categories of values. So just that's an obvious thing. Label objects directly where possible. Sorry.
No, I'm just wondering about the time.
Oh, sorry. I'm going. Okay. Stick to tried and tested visuals. We've talked about that. Grid lines. Get rid of grid lines. This is the concept that drives me most of the time. The data to ink ratio. We need the most amount of data with the least amount of ink. The more ink you have that's not representing data is problematic for us. And that's why all the things I've talked about, removing cognitive load, backgrounds, 3D, all of that stuff, it's to reduce the amount of ink. Okay. And then consistency, we've touched on already, so I'm not going to. Okay, that's the end of that sort of section. Let's move on. Colors, I'm going to spend very, very fast. Colors, we have basically, okay, color wheel. I assume we all know this. We have a color wheel that starts with red, green, blue. There are 3 primary colors. You then get colors by mixing those colors. You end up with 3 extra secondary colors and 6 in total. And then by mixing those, we end up with 6 tertiary colors. So we have 12 colors in total if we just look at our tertiary up to the level of tertiary colors. By taking all of those colors and mixing them, you can get almost 17 million different color combinations. That's what RGB basically allows us to do, 256 to the power of 3 to 17 million different color combinations. Okay, and then in terms of color, we have 3 aspects. We basically have, you can then modify those 17 million in 3 ways. You can shade them by making them darker. You can tint them by making them lighter, or you can tone them by using grayscale over them. And all of those then create another whole bunch of values that you can use. So there's really an infinite number of colors that we can use. And it's tempting to try and use too many of them. So what do we do in terms of how do we create, what do we do when thinking about color? Well, this is the main concept that we think about with color is the idea of color temperature. So the red is the hottest color and blue is the coldest color. And as you move in either direction, away from blue towards red, you get warmer. And in either direction from red to blue, you get colder. Because it's not a sliding scale, it's a continuum, so you've got to kind of adjust that. But what do we use cool colors for? Cool colors show us neutral, peaceful, steady, reliable. Warm colors show us action, concerns, excitement, all of those kinds of things. So if you're going to use colors, if you're going to use colors, that is a good way to kind of think about it. What am I using? Am I trying to show steadfastness? Am I trying to show a bit of action or vibrancy? And then go towards that kind of the color scale as you go.
Do you take consideration of your potential user?
Yes.
Because I had that problem, I tried to do that, but my superior, the guys that give me the work to do, he cannot stand the strong color.
Yeah.
That's his eyes. He's got a problem, And
so it is a very difficult thing because we should always consider accessibility. It's at all times you should be thinking. So we should definitely not choose color palettes that fall into well-known color blindness problems, for instance. So red and green. What's the other one?
Purple and yellow.
Purple and yellow. There's a whole bunch of them, but we should think about them. And generally, I will choose, and actually we're going to talk about color palettes now. I would generally not try and use warm and cold colors on the same report unless you're using them specifically for contrast. So let's look at color palettes quickly and you'll see what I mean. So color palettes basically determine character. They determine contrast, and then each one of them has a sets of pros and cons. Okay, so the first color palette is something we call monochrome. Basically, in monochrome color palette, we choose one color, one base color, and then we go up and down the scale on that color. We don't choose any other colors. So that picture is kind of a nice example. We've got like that reddy pink, and the birds all vary from one shade of it to the last shade of it. You choose one base color and you just play with that. What this palette gives us, it gives us a lot of uniformity. You will almost never design an ugly report if you use a color palette like this. And you'll notice in Word, they give you this, or PowerPoint, or even Power BI. Have you ever seen when you go on the theme, you've got like the top color, and then you've got like 10% lighter, 20% lighter, 30% lighter, 40% lighter. That's this. That's exactly what this is. Choose one color, use just the different shades of that color. Okay, it's low contrast, it's easy on the eyes, it's simple, it's gentle, it doesn't take a lot of thinking to make this work well. But the problem is it's very difficult to emphasize stuff because your eyes are so accustomed to that one color that nothing pops. Okay, so that's the downside, okay? But it's an easy one to do. We then have another color scheme called an analogous color scheme. An analogous color scheme is basically we choose one base, and we go a little bit up and a little bit down for that, and we create a scheme that has 5 or 6 colors based on that sort of small area of the color scheme. And this bird is an exact example of that. It's got blues, greens, a little bit of orange, but we'll pretend that the orange doesn't exist. But it's like blues, greens, purples. It's just that area, okay? It's a very flowing color scheme. It has a medium contrast, so we do have some contrast using that. And with good design, and that's way outside the scope of this, but with good design, you can use this color scheme to lead users on a specific path. So if you go from lighter to darker and then back to light, you can actually show users how to use your report with this. It's quite a complicated thing, but it does it. But it's less intuitive. Once you start adding more colors, you can start creating reports that don't work. And people will be like, I don't know why, but this report just doesn't work for me. And it will be possibly to do with the color scheme. So what we try and do to make it less likely that we cause that problem is we have this idea of a dominant color, a supporting color, and then an accent color. So you'd basically say, okay, I'm trying to make 60% of my visuals what I call the dominant color, 30% the supporting color, and then only 10% your accent color. Okay. And then on the far end of the scale, you have what we call a complementary color scheme. And this is what I said, you have a complementary color scheme is where you use one hot color and one cold color, and you're going to use them. This is very vibrant. It works really well to show contrast. And it's very, very good for highlighting data. If you want to highlight certain points, this is the exact way to do it. But it can be overwhelming when you have a lot of one color and then pops of the exact opposite color on the color wheel. It can be a little bit overwhelming. And even if you look at that picture of the bird, it's quite striking. Like there's a lot of color in between those two, just in between those two colors. So you've got to think about what you're doing. So what you actually try and do is we use lots of neutrals and we only accent with the colors. Even though we're saying our color theme is blue and yellow, we're probably doing a lot of grays with maybe blue something in the graph and the yellows at different points. Quickly going to pop into Power BI and show you the same report with these three different kinds of color schemes so that you can see what we're doing here.
James,
yeah.
I'd like to stop you. Just like to ask, how much longer do you think the presentation is going to be?
I'm going to try and be like 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, no, this is the longest section. Well, we've done the longest section. This is the next one, and the other two are quite short. So. Okay, so this is a monochrome color palette. Sorry, this is a monochrome color palette. So I've literally got one color here, and I'm just showing different shades and tints of that color. Okay, you can see that even where I've tried to highlight something, it does stick out, but it's not like super obvious that I'm highlighting it. Okay. Then we have this idea of an analogous color theme where we've got the multiple colors. Here, I wouldn't necessarily recommend these colors,
no.
But it's just the idea of you going in either direction. And you can see that I've got mainly that like intermediate turquoisey kind of color most of the time, and then little bits of the green and the darker blue. Okay, so but it's exactly the same report, but you can see it feels kind of different by using a different palette. And then the extreme example is if we do something like that, which now it's very clear what I want you to look at. Like even though the blue is a more dominant color than the yellow is very clear that those are the points that your eye will be drawn to. Okay. So color is very important in our reports, and it can really make a difference to how your users experience and interact with your reports. Okay.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
You have to consider also the color scheme of the company or the entity you're doing the work for.
Absolutely, and it's hard, but you can create any of those color schemes and still consider the same thing. You can create an analogous color scheme as long as you know that your base color must be X. And same, we can create a complementary color theme as long as you know that your base color must be. You do need to sometimes work around it. You can't just go, this is my color, I must go 180 degrees across the color wheel to find the contrast. Might not work. You may have to go up or down a little bit and find it, but you kind of want to be close to it. Yeah. Okay, so let's pop back into the presentation. I think that's the end of colors. Okay. Cool. Layout. This is really simple. I really only talk about one thing in terms of layout. And layout, forget about that. Sorry. I like this idea of grids. Okay. The grid is not super clear on the report there, but essentially I've got a 3x3 grid over here. And you can fill it in any way you want, and it kind of looks neat. It's not necessarily wonderful, and the colors obviously are very distracting, but it makes sense, okay? But the problem is that when those colors bleed into each other like that, they get very overwhelming. So what we do is we take that same 3x3 grid and we add in what we call gutters. So now we've got gutters at the bottom, in the middle, at the top, and the sides. And when we add in the gutters, and we do those same, I'm going to do the exact same colors that we had before, but I'm just going to split them up. So if you're using more than one square, you go over the gutters, but if you are stopping, you keep the gutters free. So now you've got that, which kind of looks like a Microsoft logo, but it's not meant to. It just happens to end up that way. You've got that kind of layout, and sorry, that is significantly less overwhelming than what we had before. So if we look at the, I think it was this one, there was, you know, those are very, very overwhelming. Okay, this one works better for me in Power BI. So let me pop into Power BI again, and we can have a look at, I think it's this tab. Okay. No, not that tab. Okay, give me a second, sorry. Layout, it'll be that's cool layout, James. Okay, so if we start here, we have a blank report. Okay, the first thing we do, let's add in some grid lines. Come on. Okay, there's some grid lines. Okay, it looks a bit like a chessboard. Cool. We now, if we were now to put in a whole bunch of visuals and just pop them in, without considering grid gutters or spacing, that works. It's not wonderful. It's a bit overwhelming. It's very busy, but it's neat. You're not going to really get a user coming back and be like, yes, your report looks terrible. If you, maybe with the colors it might, but with in terms of the layout, when you've got cards and two graphs and they all align to each other nicely, you'll be fine. Okay, but let's make it better by adding some gutters. So we'll go back to, I think, so now I've got that same grid spaces, but I've just added some gutters in between. And we're going to put the exact same set of visuals in with a little bit of space, and that report is significantly better. Without us having done anything, we haven't changed visuals, we haven't changed colors, we haven't changed, all we've done is put a little bit of space in between each visual, and we've got a report that it doesn't feel overwhelming. There's space to breathe, with a little bit of smartness in terms of what we colored, what color. You would easily be able to group various things together and show the users, these are your key metrics, these are this, and that's your, what we're talking about. You could obviously add in colors for the top and bottom theme popularities and things, and suddenly you've got a report that really sort of shows what's going on. So this is a really simple trick for me. I do this almost exclusively. I will literally pixel perfect put my graphs in, and it also forces you to not, I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger and a little bit smaller. I know that if I want to make something bigger, I have to make it 80 pixels bigger at any time. Either 80 pixels bigger in that direction or 80 pixels bigger in this direction. And that means I have to think about what my design is going to look like. Because I have, if your standard Power BI report is 1280 by 720, that means I've got a 9 by 16, 9 by 16 graph that chart that I'm working on, or grid that I'm working on. So canvas, exactly. And I have to think about how I'm going to use those 9 by 16 spaces. It forces me to limit how many visuals I put in, and it forces me to think about, like, if I need to make a change, I'm not changing one visual, I'm changing two visuals, and then this one's shrinking and that one's getting bigger. So am I trading off, or is this right, or whatever? So it's a cool way to just keep yourself like really, really in check. Okay, and then the last section, which is very simple. I wasn't going to touch on this. We've done this. Essentially, the idea about using space effectively is to hide things that we don't use very often. If you've got different users who like the same visual represented in different ways, give them a way to switch between the visual. Don't try and put both visuals on the report and make both of them cramped. Give them here's a bookmark. When you click on it, it changes this from a bar chart to a pie chart, or bar, whatever your users particularly want. I want a table and you want a bar chart. Okay, cool. There we go. I'll show you an example of that. Okay, we've talked about tooltips extensively tonight. We don't have to focus on that. And then using bookmarks to switch between visuals showing the same thing. Okay, so just I have got an example of that very quickly. It's this one. Oh yes, yeah. So if we click on, I can't remember which one I have to click on to make a change. Oh, that's blank. I click on it twice. Ah, yes. So it'll change that visual. So someone wanted it like that, and someone else wanted it like that. Okay, cool. We've got two different ways of showing the same thing. But I didn't have to try and force my report to have this cramped area where I've got two different graphs in one space. So that's one way. And then this is less important nowadays, but I always used to do this thing where you built filter panes on the side that you could bring your filter panes in and then make them go away again when you actually chose your filters and applied them. So we don't have to do that so much anymore because the filters are now actually kind of a default experience in Power BI. But when we first started, that was a thing. Cool. So I think that's really the fundamentals of design. I apologize for not using your bricks demo, but as you can see, there was quite a lot of work set up in the Power BI report. And I didn't really want to have to go and design a whole report so that I could apply color themes and show bookmarks and all of those things in using the data that you guys have already used. So I stayed stuck with mine. But yeah, does anyone have any questions?
That was great.
Thanks.
Really enjoyed it. Really, really good. And I really like the way that you showed the same graph, but like in the same page, but with different colors, so you could really see the difference.
Great. So I do have a question for you.
Yes.
Do you use the snap to grid feature in Power BI?
I don't actually, because they don't allow you to put gutters in. So if you snap to grid, you're doing that full thing. So no, I don't. I literally put this on 80, 160, or actually 85, 165, every single visual. Yeah, it's time consuming, but it's worth it for me. I find that I am literally, if I do this, my reports look pretty. If I don't do it, my reports look dog ugly. Like I can't really explain it. Like my reports work fine as long as I follow my own little formula of keeping these things in perfect blocks, in perfect layouts, and it doesn't matter how many visuals you put or what shapes you choose. As long as you follow that rule, it looks like it's the weirdest thing. I can't really explain it, but it's a big thing. Website design uses exactly the same concept. There's a whole big thing called 960.gc or GS or something. It's a web design concept where everyone just, things go in these gutters and uses their grids and gutters, and that's how it works. So, yeah. And then only the pros break the rules.
Yes.
So when you're really good, you can break the rules. I'm not really good. I just make it work the way I make it work.
So you didn't mention like the aligning and all those type of things in the format. You go and you align a group of that's a card or whatever.
So you can do that, of course, but because I'm physically putting in the pixels, I'm saying this must be at vertical point 85. I know that they're always aligned. I don't have to use the alignment, but yes, I mean that's a simple way to do part of the same thing. But I really like that fine grained control because I know exactly what size my visuals must be. They must be exactly like there's a set number of size pixels. Visuals can either be 70 pixels wide, 150 pixels wide, 230, 310, etc., etc. Like you can
develop already.
I've got an idea in my head of exactly how wide things must be, and that's what I do. So yeah. There's lots of chat. Sorry, someone will be monitoring that.
I see we are a little bit pressed for time. I would love to chat about this because I regularly count pixels on my Power BI reports. But yeah, I think we should hand over to Sven and keep going with the survey. That was a really great session, James. I'm sure we have some more questions in the chat and in the room, and we can definitely discuss them a little bit later with some users.
James, do you have a proportionality 60, 30, 10 for different stuff? I'm just asking.
Generally, I put cards along the top and then graphs below the cards.
Okay.
It depends. Not every report is the same, and I don't try and force them into one sort of pattern. But yes, I do. What you'll see is when you use that kind of grid layout, that you actually don't have that many options. If you put a card that's 70 by 70, for instance, it's too small. It doesn't work. So you have to go, okay, I'm going to make it actually 150 by 70. Then it's fine. Then it works okay. But that determines what you can do. You can't go and try and put a bar chart in a visual that's only 2 by 2 squares in your little layout. You have to make it a bit bigger. You have to make it 4 by 3 or whatever. And by doing that, it kind of leads you on the path of what you can and can't do, just by following that sort of little standard.
Do you design for a particular screen size? I mean, like HD or
1280 by 720, the default Power BI. That is the 1280 by 720. It's the default Power BI size. I don't change that. You can do lots of different things with Power BI sizes, but 1280 by 720 is a widescreen, and that's the ratio is what you're looking at, 16 by 9. So.
Okay. Yeah, right. Just in the interest of time. The survey, and then you can keep the discussion going afterwards.
Okay, so we do have the survey, although I still want to do the price. So the price is the same as last time. Okay, well, the price is the same as always, which is the Enterprise DNA $500 voucher for the video training and so on. If it is that you want to be eligible for the prize, then please know that you have to participate in that program, meaning involve yourself in the quick Q&A and the forums and so on. Okay, so if you would like to do that, obviously then feel free to answer the question. The question I have already typed out. I'm about to hit enter on it. For those who are online, can you? I'll monitor the chat, and then obviously we can also listen to see who's answering here. So I will say it and hit enter at the same time to make it fair. I had thought of making the question slightly harder than I have now decided, but that reason is leniency, because James gave a lot of information. And perhaps your brain's a bit overloaded, so cognitive overload. Okay, fine. So are you ready?
Yes.
Name 3 of the 6 values you can see on a box and whisker chart. Enter. I had said 4, but now we're going for 3.
Okay. Quartiles, median, outliers, range, and average. So you median, quartiles.
Which ones?
So 50, 75, and 100. The median, the outliers, and quartile.
We do have a question also in the chat.
Okay, that's actually not the right answer there either. It's close.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. Well, there's 3 of them.
I was going to say. Well, okay.
You asked for 3. He's got 3 correct in the chat.
Okay.
95%
But the 95 is not right. Yeah. Okay. You know what? I might try and give you both. Okay. So, all right. So the answer there was 25, 75. Okay. Min, max, median, and mean. So lots of. Okay. But okay. Let's try. So Alex, I'm gonna send out my email address quickly. I obviously didn't hit enter on the question, which is silly. Okay, but here's Alex. Here's my email address. It's our UN function tomorrow, so I won't be on emails tomorrow, but I'll email them on Monday. Okay.